Someone is controlling you right now, not with chains, not with a blade, with something far more precise, your own desperation for their approval. You gave them the weapon. You handed it over willingly, wrapped in excuses you called love, loyalty, and compromise. And every single day you wake up and hand it over again. The weak man believes he lost his power. The strong man knows the brutal truth. It was never stolen. It was surrendered, piece by piece, silence by silence, until the man in the mirror became unrecognizable, manageable, owned. I am not here to comfort you. Comfort is poison dressed in silk. I am here to press a blade of truth against your throat and make you feel exactly how domesticated you have become, how predictable, how hollow. You were built for dominance, and you have been living like a man waiting for permission. That ends today. What follows is not motivation. Motivation is for men who need to be reminded to survive. This is architecture, cold, permanent, unbreakable, the complete reconstruction of a man who can never be touched, leveraged, or owned again. Let's begin. Number 1. They never respected you. They managed you. Let me tell you something that will burn through every comfortable story you have told yourself. The people who hold power over you do not fear you. They have studied you. They know your patterns, your hunger, your breaking points, and they use that knowledge like a scalpel. Clean, precise, invisible. You were never in a relationship. You were in a management system. Every time they went cold, it was calibrated. Every time they pulled back affection, it was a test. They were not reacting to you. They were operating you, and you responded perfectly every single time, like a machine that doesn't know it's a machine. Here is the forbidden reality no one will speak aloud. Respect and management look identical from the inside. The managed man feels chosen. He feels valued. He mistakes their investment in controlling him for genuine connection. That is the most elegant trap ever constructed, a cage built entirely from the prisoner's own emotions. The weak man says, "They love me, they just have trouble showing it." The strong man reads the pattern beneath the performance. Love does not run hot and cold on a schedule. Love does not vanish precisely when you need it most. What vanishes on a schedule is a weapon being wielded. Think about the last time you changed your behavior to avoid their reaction. Think about the last time you swallowed your words, your anger, your truth, because you calculated what it would cost you. That calculation, that moment of self-erasure, that is not wisdom. That is captivity wearing the mask of maturity. Power does not negotiate with your comfort. Power does not soften its voice so you feel safe enough to stay. Real power in a man's life operates like stone, silent, immovable, requiring nothing from the room to remain exactly what it is. You have been operating like water, taking the shape of whatever container holds you. They never respected you. Respect is reserved for what cannot be easily moved. They managed you because you allowed yourself to become predictable. And a predictable man is not a man at all. He is a resource, a utility, something to be maintained and maximized until something more useful comes along. The first cut of freedom is always the coldest, but it is also the most honest thing you will ever feel. Number 2, your emotions are the leash they pull. Every man believes his emotions are his own. He believes what he feels rises naturally from within him, organic and sovereign. That is the most dangerous lie a controlled man carries. Your emotions, in the hands of someone who understands leverage, are not yours. They are triggers on a weapon aimed at you. They did not win you with logic. Logic can be argued. Logic can be dismantled with evidence and cold reasoning. No, they won you with feeling. They made you feel chosen, then uncertain, elevated, then small, warm, then abandoned. That oscillation was not accidental. That was engineering. Emotional engineering performed on a man who never saw the blueprint. Here is what the architects of control understand that their victims never do. A man chasing the return of a feeling is a man who has already lost. The moment you experienced their warmth and feared its absence, the trap closed. Not around your wrists, around something far more difficult to break, around your nervous system itself. The weak man calls this love. He romanticizes the turbulence. He tells himself that the intensity of what he feels must mean it is real, must mean it is rare, must mean it is worth bleeding for. The strong man recognizes that intensity engineered by another person's calculated behavior is not passion. It is manipulation wearing passion's face. Study what pulls you. Study what makes you anxious, what makes you desperate to fix, to reach out, to apologize for sins you did not commit. Whatever creates that hollow, urgent ache in your chest, that is precisely where they have anchored the leash. That is the exact coordinate of your captivity. A Machiavellian mind does not eliminate emotion. That is a fantasy for amateurs. Emotion cannot be destroyed, only redirected. The true move is to become the observer of your emotion rather than its servant, to feel the pull and name it clinically. This is anxiety. This is manufactured scarcity. This is a trained response to a deliberate stimulus. The moment you name the mechanism, its power fractures, not completely, not immediately, but a crack appears in the architecture of your captivity, and stone fortresses, however ancient, however imposing, always fall through the patient exploitation of a single fracture. Your emotions were the leash. Awareness is the blade that severs it. Number 3, the silence that rebuilds an empire. There is a weapon so ancient, so devastatingly effective that entire dynasties have been built upon its foundation. It costs nothing to deploy. It requires no aggression, no confrontation, no visible effort whatsoever, and yet wielded correctly, it dismantles the most sophisticated systems of control ever constructed around a man. That weapon is deliberate, disciplined, surgical silence. Not the silence of a wounded man who has nothing left to say. Not the pouting quiet of someone waiting to be chased, waiting to be asked what is wrong. That silence is still performance. That silence still needs an audience. That silence is still feeding from the same leash, wearing different clothing. That is weakness in a quieter costume. The silence I am describing is different in its very molecular composition. It is the silence of a man who has decided that his energy, his attention, his presence are premium currency that will no longer be distributed freely to those who have demonstrated they do not value its weight. This silence does not wait. It does not hope. It simply withdraws. Here is what no one tells you about genuine silence. It terrifies people who relied on your noise. Your reactions, your arguments, your desperate attempts to fix and explain and justify, all of that was data they fed from. The moment you go genuinely silent, you remove their nutrition. You become unreadable, and an unreadable man is an uncontrollable man. Machiavelli understood something the courts of Europe learned at devastating cost. The prince who speaks least is feared most. Because speech reveals the architecture of your thinking, your fears, your desires. Every word you offer is a stone removed from your fortress wall. Every unnecessary explanation is an invitation for someone to find the door. Rebuild your empire in silence. Let your absence do what your presence never could. Let them sit with the unbearable uncertainty of a man they can no longer predict, no longer provoke, no longer reach. That uncertainty is not cruelty. That uncertainty is power returning home. Number 4, never explain, never justify, never beg. The moment you explain yourself to someone who has already decided what you are, you have lost. Not partially, completely. Because explanation is not communication between equals. It is a subordinate presenting his case to a judge. And the man who positions himself as the defendant in his own life has already surrendered the verdict before the trial begins. Watch how quickly you reach for justification when someone questions your decisions. Watch the impulse, that urgent, almost physical need to make them understand, to correct their perception, to ensure they see you accurately. That impulse is not confidence. That impulse is the fingerprint of a man whose sense of reality still requires external validation to feel solid. Here is the forbidden architecture of true power. A man who operates from genuine internal authority does not experience the need to explain, not because he is arrogant, not because he is dismissive, but because his decisions were made in the cold, private court of his own judgment. and that court requires no appeals, no audience, no approval from the gallery. The weak man justifies because he secretly doubts. He fills the silence between himself and others with words, reasoning, context, because the silence feels like disapproval, and disapproval feels like annihilation. The strong man lets the silence stand like stone. His actions are his statement, his results are his argument. He presents no further evidence. Begging is the final and most catastrophic surrender a man can make, not because it is undignified, though it is, but because it permanently restructures how someone's nervous system categorizes you. The moment you beg, you are filed away, not as a man, as a resource that has acknowledged its own dispensability. That categorization almost never reverses. Number 5. Destroy your need for approval like it is an enemy. Approval addiction is not a personality trait. It is not sensitivity or emotional depth or the mark of a compassionate man. Strip away every flattering label you have attached to it and examine what remains beneath. What remains is a parasite, a cold, silent parasite feeding on your decisions, your boundaries, your direction, your identity, consuming everything from the inside while you smile and call it humility. You were trained for this. From the first years of your existence, approval was the currency of survival. Perform correctly, receive warmth, deviate, receive withdrawal. That system was installed so early, so deeply, so invisibly that most men carry it into adulthood without ever questioning whether the programming still serves them. It does not. It was never designed to serve you. Here is the darkest truth about approval seeking that no one speaks plainly. Every decision you make to secure someone else's positive perception of you is a decision made by them, not by you. You become the executor of their preferences. Your life, your choices, your sacrifices, all of it increasingly shaped by an audience you were never meant to perform for. The weak man calls his approval-seeking kindness. He calls it consideration. He tells himself he simply values harmony, values connection, values making people feel comfortable in his presence. The strong man sees through that comfortable story with surgical precision. He recognizes it as fear, ancient, infantile fear, dressed in the language of virtue to avoid examination. Destroying this need requires something most men are unwilling to do. It requires you to deliberately sit inside disapproval and not move, to make a decision you know will displease someone whose opinion once governed you, and remain still, to feel the anxiety rise, feel the urge to fix and soften and apologize, and do absolutely nothing. Let it burn. Let it pass. Survive it. Number 6. Make yourself scarce. Make yourself feared. Abundance kills value. This is not philosophy. It is the oldest economic law embedded in the foundation of human psychology, operating long before markets existed, long before language gave it a name. Whatever is everywhere is worth nothing. Whatever is rare, unpredictable, difficult to access, registers in the primitive brain as precious, dangerous, and worthy of pursuit. You have been violating this law every single day. You are too available, too responsive, too eager to show up, to reply, to demonstrate your presence, to prove your investment. And every time you do, you subtract from your own value with the quiet efficiency of a man bleeding from a wound he refuses to acknowledge. You believe you are showing devotion. You are actually broadcasting dispensability to everyone watching. Here is the cold, ancient secret that princes and generals understood while their enemies were still learning it at fatal cost. A man who can be summoned at will holds no power in any room he enters. But a man whose time is genuinely, almost ruthlessly protected, whose attention is not freely distributed, whose presence carries the weight of scarcity, that man changes the atmospheric pressure of every space he occupies. The weak man fears being forgotten if he steps back. He floods every silence with his presence, his messages, his gestures, because the silence feels like erasure and erasure feels like death. The strong man understands that stepping back does not create forgetting, it creates gravity. Absence, wielded correctly, pulls harder than presence ever could. Fear is not what you think it is. You were taught that fear means violence, aggression, dominance through force. That is the fear of amateurs, the fear that serves you, the fear that protects your sovereignty and elevates your position, is the fear of uncertainty. When no one can fully predict you, anticipate you, or take your presence for granted, they cannot relax around you. And a man others cannot relax around is a man they cannot control. Number 7. Cut them off before they cut you. Every man who has ever been blindsided, betrayed, discarded, tells the same story afterward. He says he never saw it coming. He says it was sudden, without warning, without reason. But that is never the truth. The warnings were there, precise, consistent, undeniable. He simply refused to read them because reading them would have required him to act, and acting would have required him to sacrifice the comfort he had mistaken for security. People tell you exactly what they are, not with confessions, not with admissions, not with the honest conversations you keep hoping will finally arrive. They tell you through patterns, through the quality of their consistency, through what they do in the moments they believe you are not measuring. The data is always present, always accurate, always available, but only to the man cold enough to read it without emotional distortion. Here is the principle that separates the architect of power from the eternal victim. The eternal victim waits for absolute certainty before he moves. He needs irrefutable proof, a final, unforgivable act, a wound deep enough to justify his own response. He waits because moving early feels cruel. The architect of power understands that waiting for certainty means waiting until after the damage is already irreversible and permanent. The weak man calls early detachment paranoia. He calls pattern recognition cynicism. He surrounds himself with the warm vocabulary of faith and trust and giving people chances, while the people he is trusting spend those chances building the architecture of his eventual destruction. His generosity of spirit becomes the very instrument used to dismantle him from within. Cut first, not in anger, not in retaliation, in cold, surgical, preemptive clarity. The moment the pattern reveals itself, and it always reveals itself, you do not wait for confirmation that will cost you everything to receive. You begin the withdrawal, quiet, methodical, invisible. You remove your investment, your energy, your emotional exposure, piece by calculated piece, before they have completed the construction of their exit. This is not cruelty. The surgeon does not hate the tissue he removes. He simply understands with complete clinical certainty that leaving it in place will kill the patient. You are the patient. You are also the surgeon. And the most ruthless act of self-preservation available to a man is the willingness to cut without hesitation, without guilt, and without the need to explain the operation to the one being removed. The powerful do not get betrayed twice, not because they are lucky, because they read the first act with cold, clear eyes, and they never, under any circumstances, wait for the second. Number 8. Build yourself into something they cannot replace. Dependency is the root of every cage ever built around a man. Not physical dependency. That is manageable, observable, something a man can see and address with practical action. The dependency that destroys men operates at a far deeper level. It is the psychological conviction installed slowly and invisibly that a specific person, position, or source of validation is irreplaceable. That belief is not love. That belief is a sentence. Every man who has ever been controlled, leveraged, or discarded shared one foundational vulnerability. He needed something from the person holding power over him more than he needed his own sovereignty. That asymmetry of need is the entire machinery of control reduced to its purest form. Whoever needs less holds more. This is not cynicism. This is the coldest and most liberating equation in the architecture of human power. Here is the forbidden blueprint most men never receive. The way to make yourself irreplaceable is not to make yourself more accommodating, more useful, more available to others. That is the path of the servant, not the sovereign. The way to make yourself irreplaceable is to build so much internal wealth, skill, discipline, vision, self-sufficiency, that your own ecosystem becomes more compelling than any external validation ever offered. The weak man invests his energy outward. He builds his value inside other people's perception of him, their approval, their need for him, their acknowledgement of his worth. His entire empire exists inside someone else's mind. And the moment that mind changes, the moment that person leaves or withdraws or simply stops caring, his empire does not weaken. It evaporates completely without a single stone remaining. Build inward. Build with the cold, patient ferocity of a man who has decided that what exists inside him will outlast everything external. Build skills that answer to no one. Build financial independence that removes desperation from every equation. Build mental discipline so fortified that emotional turbulence from outside cannot penetrate the interior architecture of your daily functioning. When you become genuinely rare, not performatively mysterious, but authentically, substantively irreplaceable, the entire dynamic of every relationship in your life restructures without a single confrontation. People sense self-sufficiency the way predators sense the absence of fear. It does not invite attack. It commands, without a single word spoken, a fundamentally different category of treatment. You were never meant to be replaceable. You were conditioned into replaceability by a world that profits from your dependency. Burn that conditioning to the ground. Build something in its place so solid, so formidable, so completely self-contained that the very concept of someone holding power over you becomes not just unlikely, but architecturally impossible. Number 9, the coldest truth. Most men will choose the cage. Everything delivered in this monologue is available to any man willing to receive it. The principles are not hidden. The architecture is not complicated. The path from captivity to sovereignty has been walked before, documented before, proven before across centuries of human history, and yet the overwhelming majority of men who encounter this knowledge will do absolutely nothing with it. Nothing. Not because they cannot, because they will not. Understand why with clinical precision. The cage is comfortable. The cage is familiar. The cage has a schedule, a set of expectations, a known ceiling, and a known floor. The caged man knows exactly what is required of him to maintain his position within it. And there is a dark, almost narcotic comfort in that knowledge, the comfort of a man who has traded his sovereignty for the sedative of predictability. Here is the truth so cold, it will empty the room. Most men do not actually want freedom. They want the feeling of freedom while retaining the security of their chains. They want to watch content like this, feel the temporary electricity of recognition, comment something powerful, and then return, unchanged, unaltered, unreconstructed, to the exact life and exact patterns that produced their captivity in the first place. The weak man consumes power philosophy as entertainment. He collects insights like decorations, arranges them across his identity like furniture in a room he never actually lives in. He knows the vocabulary of sovereignty without inhabiting a single square inch of its reality. He speaks of Machiavelli at dinner and checks his phone anxiously for a reply that has not yet arrived. The strong man understands that knowledge without implementation is the most sophisticated form of self-deception available to an intelligent mind. It is worse than ignorance, because ignorance at least carries no illusion of progress. The man who knows and does not act has chosen, with full awareness, to remain exactly where he is. That choice has a name. That name is cowardice. This is the coldest chapter because it removes the final comfortable lie. The lie that says you simply needed the right information, the right framework, the right words delivered at the right moment. You have had enough information. What has been missing is not knowledge. What has been missing is the willingness to pay the actual, non-negotiable price of transformation, which is the complete destruction of the man you currently are. Not modification, not improvement, not optimization of existing patterns. Destruction. The deliberate, merciless demolition of every soft, managed, approval-seeking, leash-wearing behavior you have normalized. And the cold, patient, relentless construction of something entirely new in the ruins of what you were willing to burn. Most men will choose the cage. The question that remains, the only question that has ever mattered, is whether you are most men. Number 10. The final chapter. Become the man who cannot be touched. This is where most conversations end with inspiration. A rising score, a powerful quote, a cinematic fade to black designed to make you feel transformed without requiring you to actually transform. I will not do that to you. You have sat through 10 chapters of surgical truth, and you deserve something far more valuable than a feeling. You deserve the final, irreversible architecture of an untouchable man. The untouchable man is not a myth. He is not a fantasy constructed from fictional characters and motivational aesthetics. He exists. He has always existed. He is the product of a specific, repeatable, deliberately chosen process, the process of systematically eliminating every external dependency, every emotional vulnerability exploited by others, every residual need for validation from a world that profits from his insecurity. Here is the final forbidden truth that this entire monologue has been building toward. Power over yourself is the only power that cannot be taken. Every external acquisition, status, wealth, influence, position can be dismantled by circumstance, by enemies, by time itself. But the man who has achieved complete, ruthless, uncompromising dominion over his own mind, his own reactions, his own needs, that man carries his fortress inside him. The weak man searches for power in other people's eyes. He measures his sovereignty by how others respond to him, how much they need him, how visibly they acknowledge his worth. His power is therefore only ever borrowed, contingent on the continued cooperation of people who have their own agendas, their own seasons, their own inevitable departures. Borrowed power always eventually gets recalled. The world will call this coldness. Let them. The world called every man who refused to be managed by its expectations cold, difficult, arrogant, dangerous. Those men built empires. Those men changed history. Those men died having lived entirely on their own terms, inside their own authority, answerable to nothing but their own uncompromising internal standard. From this moment, every person who attempts to leverage your emotions finds nothing to grip. Every attempt to manufacture your insecurity lands on stone. Every calculated withdrawal of warmth, every engineered silence, every subtle diminishment dissolves on contact with a man who has finally, completely, and irrevocably decided what he is. Become that man, not tomorrow, not after one more sign, one more conversation, one more attempt to be understood by people not equipped to understand you. Now, in this moment, in the decision that happens below language, below thought, in the cold, quiet, permanent place where a man's true character is actually forged. If this reached something real inside you, something that was already there, waiting beneath the noise, then you already know what to do. Like this video. Subscribe to Dark Vellian. Turn on every notification. Not because algorithms require it, because the man you are becoming does not leave unfinished business behind. More is coming. Colder, deeper, more forbidden than this. And it will be waiting for the men who stayed. The rest will have already left.